So if you work in critical care, you've definitely noticed a pretty massive shift, right? The days of packing post-cardiac arrest patients in ice, well, they seem to be over. But why? That's exactly where we're going to dive into today. We're going to look at the new science that has completely rewritten the playbook for how we care for these patients. And this really is the big question, isn't it? For so long, inducing hypothermia was considered the gold standard for protecting the brain. Now the guidelines have moved away from it. So what happened? Let's follow the evidence and see where it leads.
You know, the language we use tells a story all on its own, and this is the perfect example. We started with therapeutic hypothermia, which is all about making someone cold. Then it evolved to targeted temperature management, a bit more nuanced, and now the latest guidelines just call it temperature control. This isn't just wordplay. It shows a massive shift in our entire philosophy.
Okay, so to really get why we've changed, we have to understand why we started doing it in the first place. For decades, the fundamental belief was simple. Cold is good for the brain. It's an intuitive idea, and it made a lot of sense.
This whole idea actually goes way back to the 1950s in cardiac surgery. But for post-arrest care, the year 2002 was the real turning point. Two huge trials came out that suggested cooling patients down to 32 to 34 degrees Celsius actually improved brain outcomes. And based on that, boom, it became the standard of care all over the world for more than a decade. The theory behind it was, well, it was really elegant. See, after the heart restarts, blood rushes back to the brain, and that can actually cause a second wave of damage. We call it reperfusion injury. The thought was, if you cool the brain down, you slow its metabolism. A slower brain doesn't need as much oxygen, and that should, in theory, lessen that secondary damage. It just made sense. But, you know, in science, even the best-sounding theories have to be put to the test. And that's exactly what happened next. A couple of absolutely massive international studies came along and decided to challenge everything we thought we knew about the promise of cold. And really, the whole debate boiled down to two very simple but incredibly powerful questions. The first big one, the TTM trial in 2013 asked, is colder better? Does going all the way down to 33 degrees really help more than just aiming for 36? Then the TTM2 trial in 2021 took it a step further and asked an even bigger question. Wait a minute, is making someone cold at all better than just aggressively stopping them from getting a fever?
These trials were enormous. We're talking thousands of patients. And the results, well, they sent shockwaves through the entire critical care community. The verdict really challenged over a decade of practice, and it all came down to a single outcome.
This was it. This was the bottom line. After all the effort, all the resources, all the side effects of actively cooling patients, did it actually help more people survive and walk out of the hospital with their brain function intact? Which one was better? And here's the bombshell. ILCOR, the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, looked at all the evidence together, and their conclusion was just crystal clear. There was absolutely no difference in survival or good neurological function between the group that was cooled and the group where they just prevented a fever. Let that sink in for a second. Their practice that was standard of care for years offered no real benefit over just keeping the patient from getting hot. The key wasn't about making patients cold. It was about preventing fever. This one finding changed everything.
So with that new evidence, we obviously needed a new playbook. So let's take a look at how this all translates into practice today using the updated guideline from Australia and New Zealand. That's ANZCOR Guideline 11.8 as our guide.
Hey, remember that slide on terminology from the beginning? Well, here's where it all comes home. The guideline itself changed its name. That shift to temperature control is deliberate. It tells us our main goal isn't to hit some magic cold number anymore. It's simply to stay in control and stop the temperature from rising.
So, what does this new protocol actually look like in practice? It's really straightforward. First, you identify your patient. Anyone who is still comatose after their circulation returns, after ROSC. Second, your target is no longer 33 or 34 degrees. It's simply keeping their temperature at or below 37.5 degrees Celsius. And third, you have to keep doing this, actively preventing fever, for at least 72 hours.
The new guidelines also clear up a couple of other really practical points. First, if a patient is naturally a little cool after resuscitation, maybe 35, 36 degrees, just leave them be. Don't actively warm them up.
And second, that old practice of slamming in large volumes of cold IV fluid out in the field, yeah, we don't do that anymore. The evidence suggests it might actually cause harm. So after all that science, all those huge trials and updated guidelines, what's the one thing you need to remember? It boils down to a single, really powerful shift in our focus.
And this is it. If you remember one thing, make it this. Our goal isn't to make patients cold anymore. It's to stop them from getting hot. The real enemy here, the thing we're fighting, is fever. Our entire strategy has shifted from inducing hyperthermia to just maintaining a normal temperature.
Of course, science never really stops, and it's important to know what we still don't know. For instance, believe it or not, no big trial has ever compared fever prevention to doing nothing at all. We also need more data on specific patient groups, like in-hospital arrests or those on ECPR. And there's still a lingering question. Could there be a tiny window right at the beginning where super fast cooling might still help? These are the questions researchers are tackling right now.
And that kind of leaves us with this final thought to chew on. Now that we've really zeroed in on fever as the enemy, what's next? What other therapies can we pair with strict fever prevention to give our patients the absolute best shot at a great recovery? That's the challenge for the next wave of research. If you want to dig into the guidelines and the evidence a bit more, you can find a ton of great resources over at lifesupportinstitute.com.au. Thanks so much for joining me.